Okay, you may think comics in the classroom is a new concept, maybe dating back 15, 20, 25 years. You would actually be pretty surprised then to find out that it goes back much, much further than that. In fact, the first known instance of comics in the classroom or comic strips being used in an educational material that we can find dates back to 1928. And it's called Texas History Movies. And it happened right here in Texas. It actually happened right here in this area, as a matter of fact. This is the cover to the large cover edition. This is one of the facsimile editions that was reprinted in 1986. And Texas History Movies originated as a 4-panel strip that was running in the Dallas Morning News from 1926 to 1928. This is the foreword from the original of the book. As it says, the series was started in 1926. It ran Monday through Saturday only, and it was eventually being used in evidently being used in classrooms even at that time. They temporarily suspended the series during the summer break of 1927. So that's what makes us think that the newspaper strips themselves were already in the classrooms at that time. The idea of the series came from E.B. Doran, who was the director of News and Telegraph Services for the Dallas News at the time. He supervised their production and gave the authors indispensable assistance and criticism. The title was suggested by Dr. J.F. Kimball, the former superintendent of schools in Dallas. And what they don't mention in the foreword here is that Jack Patton was the artist and that John Rosenfeld was the writer of the series. These were staffers working at the newspaper, and they went on to very long careers in the industry and are very well-respected men. As for the tone of the series, the creators themselves addressed it best, and this is a quote from that foreword. The authors of the series directed every effort to keep the stories humorous, human, vivid, and real. Thus, the pictures themselves tell the story and not the printed captions, which serve in the fashion of cinema subtitles. This was the era of silent films. Nor have the authors scrupled to use slang, colloquialism, modernism, and deliberate anachronism to project what they believe to be the spirit of the episode. So even back in 1926, they were trying to keep it real. And then something remarkable happened. Corporate sponsorship. After the newspapers finished in 1928, the teachers were kind of concerned about how are they going to get this material back in their classrooms. One of the things that happened is P.L. Turner Company stepped up and did a collection of all 428 newspaper strips into this hardback edition that I showed you the facsimile reproduction of. And that was made available probably more as a reference guide, might have been in school libraries, something of that nature, but obviously that would not be very practical for a textbook for students. So the next thing that happened is at the bottom of the screen here, you can see it was sponsored by Magnolia Petroleum Company. So they had corporate sponsorship. They collected a smaller edition in a digest paperback format. It was 64 pages. It had 125 strips in it. And these were issued to students as their own textbook. So newspaper strips collected and actually given in classrooms as their official Texas history textbook. Magnolia Petroleum may not be a company that you recognize readily, but they were part of a larger corporation that you might recognize a little more, and that would be Mobil Oil, now known as ExxonMobil. So the corporate sponsorship at the time was a pretty big deal even then. Now I'm not going to bore you with the long and complex publishing history of this book. Yeah.
Wow.
But trust me, it took me many, many years to do the research for the article that I had published. Just to hit the highlights real quick. First and foremost, there's evidence that the newspaper strips were in the classroom when it was still just newspaper strips before they were even collected. Was collected in 28 with the intention of being a textbook. So from the get-go, the idea was to get it in students' hands. It had corporate sponsorship backing it. The original work stayed in print in one form or another for 33 years. When you look at the products that followed, there were a couple of knockoff attempts. One of them was a very loving tribute done by Texas's own Jack Jackson. When you take all of that into account, spiritually, this book has been in print in one form or another for over 80 years. And it was in print during the platinum, the golden, the atomic, the silver, the bronze, and the tin age of comic books. You'd be very hard-pressed to find any other newspaper strip material that stayed in print through all of those ages. So the way they achieved this is, first off, they had great source material. The history of the state of Texas reads better than almost any Hollywood Western you may have ever seen. It's full of some amazing characters. There were some amazing events. It's dramatic. It's comical. They had really good material, and they knew what to do with it. It was a very fast-paced strip. They had 4 panels to tell a story. In this example here, in these 4 panels, Francisco de Coronado had the idea to head to the New World. He tried and failed to solicit funds. He found a woman who was wealthy, married her for her money. He bought ships, he outfitted them, and he headed off to America. All that happened in 4 panels. So with only 4 panels to work with, the pacing in the story was critical. Patton and Rosenfeld knew when they needed to make the story move quickly, but they also had the sense to know when to slow it down and go into more detail when they needed to. The creators were very adept at moving the tense drama to comedy to academic history and back, and sometimes even from one day to the next, and occasionally even in the same strip, they would be able to shift the attention and the intent of what was going on. And it was funny. This is one of the biggest strengths of the strip, was that they understood the attention span of their audience. And there was quite a bit of good comedy to play on. One of the things I think these panels illustrate well is the art style itself. One of the first things that struck me when I discovered this work, the art style felt like kind of a mid-step between E. Seeger's Popeye, maybe Mort Walker's Beetle Bailey, while at the same time retaining some of the more serious art style of some of the adventure strips that have been published over the years. Particularly cartoonish elements such as the large toe pointing up and the body positioning struck me as being very reminiscent of some of the E. Seeger type stuff. So, drama and comedy, the hallmarks of good storytelling. It's worth noting in this panel that in later reprints in the 70s, when there were attempts to sanitize some of the work, one of the things that was done was the image of the cat was erased and replaced with a Spanish-style helmet, much like the one the gentleman's wearing in the previous panel. It was an attempt to do away with the animal cruelty that was depicted here, but the question that arose in my mind then was, well, why is he kicking the messenger? So that kind of confused me as to where they were going with that.